Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's me, B. Riley, and today what we're going to do is we're going to get a little further down the road on our 1964 Fender Mustang that we just refinished in the last episode. Now here's the catch with this. Red's kind of tricky, a lot like black. A lot of the defining hue that comes out of that particular color comes from its depth and its reflectivity. So it's a little scary when you're shooting Dakota red or black, and then you go to wet sand and all of a sudden the finish doesn't look so great. I mean, it's even and it's uniform, but it lacks any real spark. It looks cheap, it looks chalky, and it's a bit daunting. So on this episode, we're gonna go ahead and go over wet sanding and kind of getting the finish to the point where it's got that factory luster, but also at the same time where it's still nitro and it doesn't look plasticky or anything like that. So we're gonna go ahead and start proportionally aging the guitar. We're gonna try to get the depth back, but at the same time, we're also gonna go ahead and do our wear patterns. Now, as was mentioned in the last episode, you wanna try to do your wear patterns before you get to final sanding. And the reason is because if your wear patterns are in there when you're sanding at, say, 1,000 grit, you're gonna get a more immediate response. You're gonna have better control over where the wear is. And also, as you now progressively continue sanding up to 2,000 grit and then buffing, the differentiation in texture and or scratch marks around the wear all get removed, and you're left with a result in which somebody can only deduce that a very slow wear pattern was implemented in the methodology of making the guitar look that way. Anyway, enough of the talk, let's go ahead and get to it. So here we go on the back. This is what we were talking about in the last video where the Dakota Red can really gave up on us. Unfortunately, the Dakota Red had showed up damaged. It was an older stock I had ordered during COVID, during the pandemic, to kind of set myself up in case if transit went down and I still had to do refinish if I couldn't get shipment from outside of the state. But unfortunately, this can was dead on arrival. Something was wrong with the sealing O-ring on the top. It would not take a nozzle. It wouldn't take any nozzle, and all the nozzles I had came from other Gracie's cans were the same size. So that is why we have splatter texture all over the back. And it's regrettable because, the top is definitely in a better state. This is, a little bit of 800 up to 2,000 will be right as rain. Back here, we're gonna have to hit it with 600, and we might have to hit it hard to get these pock marks out. Okay, so we've got a good reflectivity here. We've got all the surfaces on the finish are really good, and we're ready to take it to the next stage. So last night I went ahead and took the finished product and chucked it in my freezer. Very scientific method, and just kind of left it in there for about 3 or 4 hours. And what I've got now is I've got good checking across the width of the body. We have our wear patterns in there. So the next step is going to be to actually do knocks. That means small abrasions on the side and or edges of the guitar that allude to the fact that the guitar has been around for a while. We are going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to show you how to do that with a dull knife. And also I'm going to show you how to do the graphite treatment so that we can highlight the check and also highlight the exposed wood. Because the thing is that if you do these wear patterns and you fail to follow up and darken the wood, it is a bit of a tell, because open wood is absorbent. It is fibrous, it has pores, and any open wood that is not then slightly discolored would give you the inclination that that break is recent, not something that's been around for a while. Okay, so we're going to start off real easy. And we're just going to put a light notch in there. That's all we need. So you put your thumb behind it, and then anchor your thumb on the actual guitar. So this way you're not pushing with the actual knife edge. Instead, you're pushing with your thumb, and it gives you a greater deal of control. So if ever it starts to look a little weird, you just back off. What does it matter? Sorry, Jameson's angry. Okay, here we go. You're going to crumble the finish. You don't want to cut. You want to pressure it, and just allow the finish to break so that you get that little protrusion right there. Now you also want to be mindful of how that break happened. Typically speaking, on the horns you won't get scratches, you'll get impacts, because that's a grab point, not a slide point. So if we want to open it up a little bit more, just lean on that. Let's see if we can get a bit more to the angle, and then connect the two. There we go. Okay, so we've got a good convincing break. Now what will happen is if we buff this, we'll get a good rounded edge on it. That's a big deal. When I'm checking out vintage guitars, if I see any breaks, I like to check if someone's been relicking or if something's been broken. And the one thing that somebody would look at for this is that these breaks now have a defined edge. You can see right on that left side that there's a little break point right there. So what you want to do is you want to buff these afterwards. That edge will slope down into the valley of the break. Anytime that I'm looking at a guitar and I see a break like that, that's what I want to see. I want to see that little slope down to the valley. So we're going to hit it with a bit of polish. Okay, there you go. We've got a good break. There's a little bit of the polish has kind of opened up the white a little bit, and also polishing a little bit where the finish, the clear coat has remained, gives depth to that, and we start to see the wood underneath pick up a little bit more of that amber hue that we want, instead of that bright phosphorescent white that you get on brand new products when wood is exposed. Instead, it shows that it's got a bit of age, so it kind of blends in with it. Now when we hit the graphite, we'll see all this checking come up, and then some of that will fall into the wood grain and darken that up a little bit. You could use stain for this. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit, but for this, the graphite does the trick. And then this way, now when we look at it, our eyes aren't constantly saying, why does that look just too clean? Okay, so for this next bit, go ahead and pick a spot on the guitar that's going to be hidden when it's all assembled. And let's go ahead and try and test out our graphite treatment, and alternatively, a stain treatment for some of that lighter checking that's a little bit more intricate. So if you look up here, we have no accentuation on those check lines. See, that's the problem with checking that a lot of people don't realize. It's not the checking necessarily that really shows itself. It's the particulates and the dirt and the contamination that gets into the checking. Now we look along here and we see our lines being accentuated by the graphite. Now the graphite is basically you're crushing it into a powder and you're mixing it with a slight bit of water, just dampening it. This enables the graphite to grab hold of the imperfections in the crack and actually stay put. Also, as the water dries and as your finger absorbs some of the moisture, the water that is evaporating down into the body will actually pull some of that tinted water with the graphite down into the crack. And it'll give you a good clear line. Now granted, it's not something that you might always see from 20 feet off the stage, but you can see very clearly here that when we get up close, there's a very definite difference between the before and the after. And that's all you got to do is just buff that graphite powder down into the finish. Also, another great thing is that because the finish is imperfect, it does have a tendency of tinting it. So if you actually look at the top versus the bottom is a slightly darker. It almost has a bit of tobacco staining. The top is so clean and so new that the checking almost kind of looks contrary to the actual design. It looks out of place, whereas below, it looks right as rain. Already you can kind of see right here that we've got a little, you can see a little bit of red in there and a little bit of contamination. And what that is as you're, breaking this down, the rag is capturing some of the red that's breaking away from the Dakota, and it is depositing it into the open pores of the wood. The good news is that some of the graphite got in there too, and it's kind of darkened it up a little bit. But we're going to give it a bump with some of the stain that I use. I actually use two different types of stain. They're both Minwax. One of them is dark walnut, that's 2716, and then the other one is golden oak, and that's 210B. At the ends of the guitar, you have a much higher rate of absorbency, so you want to use a lighter stain because as it takes it on almost immediately, if you're using a very dark stain, that high level of pores is going to make that spot very, very dark. So we're going to go ahead and take some of this. You just kind of want to work it a little bit back and forth and let it soak into the pores. And we have a good feathered, decay on the checking around the outsides. So this way it's believable. It's not too boxy.